Hi everyone, I'm Stan Mallow. Welcome to Paranormal Yakker. My guest on today's show is Kathleen Marden. I'll be yakking with her about the 60th anniversary edition of Captured, the Betty and Barney Hill UFO Experience, co-written with the late Stanton Friedman, Kathleen Marden. Welcome to Paranormal Yakker.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
Captured details the true story of the world's first documented alien abduction, that of your aunt and uncle, Betty and Barney Hill. You were a very, very young girl when the story broke and made international headlines. How did you and other family members react to all the publicity and notoriety their abduction garnered?
Well, the story broke in late October of 1965. Although it happened in 1961, Betty and Barney were determined to keep it confidential. When the story broke in 1965, I was a senior in high school, so I wasn't that young. And we were fine with it at that point up until in 1965 when it broke as the result of a violation of confidentiality. Betty and Barney were frantic. They thought they would lose their jobs. That year, January of 1965, they were invited by Lyndon Johnson to his inauguration because of the work they were doing politically in the state of New Hampshire. Also, Barney had received an award from Sergeant Shriver from the Federal Poverty Program for helping to set up the Rockingham County Community Action Program and becoming the first chairman of the board of directors. The Archdiocese of Manchester, New Hampshire had given him an award for setting up a literacy program in the state. And then he was also appointed to the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights as the state advisory board member. So we had all of these really important achievements that year. It was devastating to have this story go public in the Boston Traveler. Betty was a social worker for the state of New Hampshire. She feared she'd lose her job. Barney worked for the U.S. Post Office. He feared he'd lose his job. They were well known in the state. This was just an awful thing that happened to them. We met as a family and we were all concerned. It had an impact on all of us. I think today that is why I insist on maintaining confidentiality with anyone that I speak to and only write about them with a signed release. You know, that it's not a good thing to violate confidentiality. So that is the way we responded.
For those in our viewing audience who may not be fully aware of the abduction in 1961 of your aunt and uncle by non-humans who took them to their spacecraft, experimented on them, can you explain the circumstances that led up to that abduction?
I'd be happy to. Betty and Barney went on a short vacation out to Niagara Falls, spent the night there, then headed up through Ontario, spent the night west of Montreal, about 112 miles, and then spent a lovely afternoon as tourists in Montreal. But they decided that they would drive home, and if they grew tired, they would stop for the night along the way. They lived on the seacoast of New Hampshire, in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. As they were driving at night, at about 11 o'clock at night, they saw a new light in the sky. Barney was driving their 1957 Chevy Bel Air, two-tone blue and white. So he was paying attention to the road. But Betty saw a light that sparked her curiosity because it moved upward in an arc-like position, then seemed to stop and then would move once in a while. So she was watching this, trying to identify what it was. Barney's driving along, and finally they arrive just south of Twin Mountain, New Hampshire. You'll see it on the map. So, and New Hampshire's a very small state, so it didn't take long at all. She convinced Barney to stop so they could walk the dog, and she could use the binoculars to get a good look at this craft. Both of them looked at it, got back into the car. Barney was a confirmed skeptic. He did not believe this was even possible. They're driving down Route 3 in New Hampshire now, and they enter Franconia Notch, which is just a beautiful section of New Hampshire with mountains on each side. You begin with a wide valley. This is where the Old Man of the Mountain, New Hampshire's state symbol, was located until it fell off the mountain in 2003. But But they stopped at the old man, got out of the car again, looked up at this craft that was now hovering next to the old man's profile. His profile is 48 feet from forehead to chin. And they said that that craft was at least 1.5 to 2 times the length of the old man's profile. And it appeared to be rotating and be lighted on only one side. Then it started to move and bounce back and forth in the sky, sort of like a ping pong ball, but Barney called it a yo-yo in those days. I'm thinking about the Tic Tac and how that bounced over the turn of the ocean, the recent Navy released radar video. And, they got back into the car. Barney said, let's go. I want to get home. They're driving south. Betty's watching this craft. Barney stops just in the road to get a closer look. So they exit Franconia Notch. They're now in the part of New Hampshire, Lincoln, where the cabins and motels and theme parks and that sort of thing, family attractions are. And Betty's becoming excited. The craft is coming in very close. So Barney's looking for a place to pull over beside the road for another look when the craft now descends and hovers over the road in front of their vehicle, only about 200 feet in the air. It then descends to even lower. Barney stops the car, gets out, gets his binoculars. He's looking up at this thing. He sees a disc-shaped craft with intense blue-white lights showing through the windows. And as he steps back, the craft shifts to an adjacent field just to the east. It now descends to within 100 feet of him and only about 50 feet away in the distance. He's looking up at this through binoculars again. He's standing beside the road just at the beginning of the field, trying to identify what it is still. He's pulling the binoculars down, shaking his head, saying, it can't be. He's still trying to identify it, but it is. And he sees, and he has conscious recollection of this, it's in all the early reports, that he observes non-human entities. He said they were, quote, somehow not human, looking down at him. And he is absolutely shocked. Suddenly, all but one turn and go to what appears to be a panel. Their arms go up. He can see them from the tops of their heads down to their knees. And when they do this, little red lights start to slide out from the craft on fin-like structures, and something starts to drop down out of the bottom of the craft. And he does not like the look on the face of the one standing at the window. He believes that he is about to be captured like, quote, a bug in a net, close quote. He tears the binoculars down from his eyes and runs screaming to Betty back to the car that they have to get out of there or they're going to be captured. Within a few blocks, they hear a series of code-like buzzing sounds striking the trunk of the vehicle. Barney had seen this craft moving back in his direction as he was running for the car. And so they hear these buzzing sounds striking the trunk of the car. The car starts to vibrate. They have a tingling sensation that passed through their bodies. The next thing they knew, as if only a moment had passed, they're 35 miles down the highway. They hear another series of these buzzing sounds, but they don't see the craft this time. They turn to full consciousness, drive home looking for human contact. They feel a great need for human contact. They're looking for a police officer, a restaurant that's open, anything. And there's nothing open. They arrive home at about 5 to 5:15. The watch that never worked again has been set by Betty for 5:15. That's when she used the house clock to set the watch. And there is physical evidence that something has happened. They intended to arrive home between 2 and 3 in the morning. They cannot recall what has happened in that period of lost time. Her dress is torn. There are shiny spots that are magnetized on the trunk of the vehicle. Barney's best dress shoes are so deeply scraped that he has to buy new shoes. The watches they were wearing were broken. They never ran again. And of course, the binocular strap was broken. All of these mystifying things and no memory for how this happened, except for the binocular strap. That is essentially what happened to them that night.
At what point did they realize, did it come to them that they were indeed abducted and experimented on? When did they realize that?
They didn't really fully realize that until the winter, January, February. Actually, well, they still didn't know it during those months when they were having a separate hypnosis with neuropsychiatrist Dr. Benjamin Simon. This was in 1964. He used hypnosis on them in order to create a situation where they would have rapid induction. I do this, I'm a hypnotherapist too. He uses that on them. They see him separately. He reinstates amnesia at the end of each session so they cannot compare stories, and they come out telling essentially the same story. Now, Betty had had a series of 5 dreams that sort of threw a question into this. Were they actually simply confabulating under hypnosis from Betty's dreams? I did a comparative analysis of their statements all the way through, comparing the way they described things, their speaking style. I discovered that they made statements separately to Dr. Simon that were not consistent with Betty's statements in what she wrote about her dreams. But Betty and Barney were describing the same thing, different from their dream material. Barney was actually the patient for Dr. Simon. He had developed such a case of post-traumatic stress. He had conversion hysteria is what they called it, where he was physiologically ill and had to take a 3-month absence from work. He had bleeding ulcers. He was hospitalized for this. And Dr. Simon was going to treat him because it appeared to be that one experience on the night of September 19, 1961, and into the early morning hours of the 20th, when this trauma was induced in Barney.
In the hypnosis sessions there, did they say how the alien beings communicated with them? Was it done verbally, telepathically, or in some other manner?
They said that they could hear sounds coming from the mouths of these entities, kind of a mumming sound, but they understood this in English. So it was sort of like telepathic.
Was any effort made on the part of the alien beings to convey to Betty and Barney why they were abducted? Was it deliberate or a case of being at the wrong place at the wrong time?
These entities told Betty and Barney, they kept reassuring them, we will not harm you. We will return you to your car and you'll go on your way home. We only need to take you to do a few simple tests. You'll be on your way. You won't be harmed. And as Betty was being escorted down to their car after this was over, she actually invited the leader back. And he said, well, maybe I can come back. It's not my decision to make. And she said, well, if you can, how will you find me? Out of all of the millions of people on this planet, how will you find me? And he said, we can always find those that we want to find. So it makes me wonder, really, if Betty had already had maybe a lifetime of experiences, but didn't remember them, as occurs with so many people. You know, I've worked on 3 major studies on experiencers with more than 5,000 individuals. So looking for commonalities, and most experiencers are taken for the first time when they're less than 20.
Do they recall what procedures were done on them? And taking that one step further, did they ever reveal to you their fears about experiments that might have been done on them, which they don't remember or subconsciously deleted from their memory because they might be too upsetting if it came to the surface?
Under hypnosis, I believe that they revealed everything that happened to them. They both underwent the same type of procedures. These entities were very interested in their skeletal system, their joints and how they worked, their nervous system. They pressed something against their vertebrae, and it seemed like they were testing something. And so those things occurred. And then they placed Betty on a table where the examiner produced a very large needle, and they had removed her dress at this point, breaking the zipper in the process. And she said to the examiner, what are you going to do with that? He said, it's only a simple test. It's like a pregnancy test. It won't hurt. And she said, it will. Don't do it. He plunged it into her navel. Possibly he removed ova. I know it's pretty far from the ovary. Maybe he was looking at her internal organs as well. Barney did not state state that he had a needle inserted into his navel, but he did state he believed there was a sperm sample taken from him. And so it appears that they had already started their reproductive program to try to upgrade humans and to produce hybrids. That happened way back in 1961, and I've investigated cases that go all the way back into the late 1940s and early 1950s. They were not the first, but they were the first scientifically investigated case in the United States.
As you point out and captured, your aunt and uncle were very private people. If it was up to them, they would have kept their abduction quiet. Regretfully, they were betrayed by someone they trusted and confided in, who, as it turns out, wound up outing them. That had to hurt them deeply.
Oh, it absolutely did. You know, with the important positions that Barney held in the state, he was very, very proud of that. People thought highly of him. Then when the information was revealed, you know, he was perceived differently. He was perceived as some kind of UFO nut or something. As I said earlier, he didn't even believe that UFOs existed in that time frame. My gosh, it was not a good thing, and it was hard, actually.
Sure, to be betrayed by a friend like that.
Yes.
Now, I think it's important for people to know Betty and Barney did not want their abduction made public because it shuts down those who claim, oh, they did it only to be in the limelight. Regretfully, untruths was something they had to deal with.
Yes.
What gave them the strength to put up with all the nasty lies being said about them?
I have to tell you that Barney died from a massive cerebral hemorrhage in 1969. They permitted John Fuller to write the first book that was ever written based on their hypnosis sessions. It was published in the fall of 1966. By the time Barney died, you know, it was only less than 3 years later. He died in February of 1966. Massive cerebral hemorrhage. It was a terrible thing that happened to them. To be outed like that, to think that they were probably going to lose their jobs. They didn't. In fact, Betty's supervisor said glowing things about her. He wished that he had 6 more just like her. And she was then given a supervisory job in the state welfare system. Barney, unfortunately, died from a massive cerebral hemorrhage in February of 1969, just shortly, only a couple of years after that book was published. And Betty had to go on alone. Barney was deeply hurt by individuals who cast him in a new light that was completely false and not characteristic of him at all. When I talked to Betty about this, I said, Betty, why don't you sue these people for defamation of character? She said, it would be very stressful to go through court, through all of that. They're entitled to their own opinion. That hurt me deeply when people were making those false claims about Betty and Barney. And that's part of the reason why I started to do an investigation that has now spanned 30 years, more than 30 years. It was in 2005 when I invited Stanton Friedman to join me in writing this book that I had been investigating for years before that and writing slowly. But Stanton was, unfortunately, we lost him in 2019. He was a highly respected nuclear physicist, except for by those who wanted to distort information about him through character assassination. He was deeply involved in the Hill case, in the identification of a star map that Betty had drawn as the result of a post-hypnotic suggestion. She had asked the leader where they were from. Where's your home port? He produced a 3-dimensional star map. He said, do you know where you are on this map? And she said, no, I don't know very much about the universe. And he said, well, if you don't know where you are, how can I tell you where I am? So there was no frame of reference there, but she felt that he was just being kind of a little bit rude to her for that. Brilliant woman from Ohio, Marjorie Fish, was able, after 4 years of research and building model star maps, 54 light years out in all directions from the sun. She was finally, when a new catalog was released after we had undergone technological progress so that we could get a better distance data, she was able to identify it. And Stanton, being a scientist, was called in to find other scientists who would vet Marjorie's work. It's all told in great detail by Stanton Friedman in Captured, the Betty and Barney Hill UFO experience. And so he was very heavily involved in this part, verifying Betty's star map. And the scientists said that Marjorie's work was accurate. That's why I invited Stanton to join me. Not only that, but I wanted him and others to vet my work for accuracy, because I wanted to make sure I was being completely unbiased. So Dr. Bruce Maccabee, who wrote the foreword to the book, actually did this. He vetted my work for accuracy, and Linda Moulton Howe as well. Big names in the UFO field were very helpful.
Although the government has tried very hard to discredit the abduction of Betty and Barney, they did not succeed completely. So I guess there is validity in the expression, the truth will out. In the 60th anniversary edition of Captured, you include new information that leaves no doubt they were indeed abducted, and what they claimed happened did indeed happen. Could you share some of that new evidence?
I can share one piece of that evidence, but I'm under contract not to give it all away.
Oh, absolutely. Understand. Respect that. Yeah.
Yes. What I do share with people is that John Luttrell, who was the newspaper reporter who outed Betty and Barney in 5 articles in the Boston Herald, had been in communication with Stanton Friedman during his investigation of the case. And Stanton was looking for witnesses. He wrote to John, and John said that he could remember 12 to 14 people that he had spoken with in that part of New Hampshire. They were all separate in that same time frame, who observed the same craft that Betty, or a craft by the same description that Betty and Barney saw. And he knew this by drawing lines from their position to where the craft was, and they all intersected. Here we have witnesses. Stanton and I have both attempted to identify who those witnesses were, but John Luttrell said that he had left the newspaper. He now had a job in a prestigious and highly conservative hospital. And so he said, I will not cooperate in releasing this information with my name attached to it. And Stanton respected that and kept this information private. And I did as well from the time that Stanton sent that to me while John Luttrell was still living.
Having co-authored Captured with the late Stanton Friedman, a top nuclear physicist and pioneer UFO investigator, and also having collaborated with him on other books, as well as participating with him at many conferences, I would like to know what it was like working with him, and did Stanton ever mention what he hoped his legacy would be?
I absolutely enjoyed working with Stanton. He was highly intelligent. We thought alike. Our process of reasoning was very, very similar. So we got along well. He was the physical scientist. I was the social scientist. Putting our heads together created a well-rounded view of the research that we did. We got along so well together that we wrote Science Was Wrong, and then we wrote Fact, Fiction, and Flying Saucers after that. That was about the history of government involvement in UFOs and the cover-up. Boy, we had a wonderful time working together. He was such a gentleman. He
Yes.
would carry the heavy things for me, and he had an incredible sense of humor. He was just the kindest person, although he gave it to what he called the bad guys. Those were the disinformants who were saying false things about people like him and Betty and Barney and others. I just thoroughly enjoyed working with Stanton, and he always said that he hoped that he would go down in history as a scientist. He was a genius. He graduated valedictorian of his high school class. He was accepted to MIT, but his working class family didn't have the funding to send send him there. He graduated from the University of Chicago with bachelor's and master's degrees in nuclear physics and worked highly successfully in his field for 14 years. He wants to be recognized for these achievements and also for the meticulous research that he did in taking the evidence, the truth to the public. In fact, he donated what is probably the largest archival collection in the world to the archives of the province of New Brunswick. They believe that it's going to take about 10 years to put all of this collection together, to organize it, but some of it is available right now. In addition to that, the Fredericton, New Brunswick Museum has set up an exhibit on Stanton, and it is going to open on Saturday. Have already recorded a speech about Stanton and his life. I'm also going to be doing a presentation for them during the month of July. This would be very exciting to Stanton. I know he would be pleased.
Kathleen, you are one of the leading UFO researchers of our time, director of the Mutual UFO Network's Experiencer Research Team, a much sought after speaker at international UFO conferences. For those experiences who are not coming out because they fear what happened to your aunt and uncle will happen to them, what advice would you give them?
Well, I think that it's extraordinarily important to have a conversation with someone who is a non-judgmental listener, someone you can go to for support. I set up a program in the Mutual UFO Network. I was their director of Experiencer Research from 2011 to just a month ago, 2021. I'm now just a consultant to them. But in that time frame, we developed a team from 3 to 45 individuals who are there to speak to experiencers on a day-to-day basis, non-judgmentally. So all you have to do, if you would like to speak with somebody who's not going to pass judgment on you, is to go to MUFON.com, scroll down to Experiencer. It's now Resource Team. Click on that link. The members of the team will come up. You'll see the new director. You can also take a little test. It's only 30 yes and no questions. It's called the Experiencer Questionnaire. Just take that. Someone on the team will be in touch with you to help you. That's what we set up. We're on the helpful arm of MUFON.
Should viewers of Paranormal Yacker want to order the 60th anniversary edition of Captured or learn about other books you've written about your services, because I know you do the hypnosis and different places that you're going to be at, what is your contact information?
You can go to Kathleen-Marden. That's KATHLEEN-MARDEN.com. That will take you to my website, and I have books there, my books that you can order if you would like an autographed copy. The 3 that Stanton and I wrote together will have autographs from both of us. Also, those books are available on any online bookstore in all of the formats available: audiobooks, ebooks, whatever you would like, even hardcover. That is the information. You can read several free articles that I have written on my website as well.
Kathleen Marden, I thank you for being my guest on Paranormal Yacker. It was great yakking with you. I wish you success with your books and with everything you are doing. And I think with your help, the truth will come out about aliens and us interconnecting with each other. Your aunt and uncle, I'm sure, will be proud of you, as is Stanton.
Yes, thank you so much. It was a pleasure to be there to yak with you this morning.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Stan Mallow, the Paranormal Yacker. I hope you enjoyed the interview you just watched. To be sure you don't miss any interviews on my free YouTube channel, all you have to do is press the subscribe button on your screen.